Inquiry learning is all about asking good questions and learning how to learn, and on the whole I'd have to say that the ILA was a very effective inquiry-based learning project. Inquiry learning as a pedagogy is effective because students are required to answer their own questions. It is accepted that certain content is prescribed by any curriculum, but it is essential to provide a hook to get students' attention. This can then be followed by an invitation to explore a part of the content that they find particularly exciting or attention-grabbing. The ILA definitely achieved that objective when the survey that students completed graphically illustrated to them that we only have one Earth and that quite a few more Earths would be required to support us if everyone lived the typically wasteful first world lifestyle that we do. Inviting students to explore ways to alleviate a part of their ecological footprint in order to save the world gave them a feeling of power and control, not only because they could do something about a major world problem, but also because they could choose a part of the problem that interested them in particular. This achieves the objective of making students feel like masters of their own destiny, and in so doing makes the learner feel more responsible for their own learning. Another aspect of the ILA that I felt worked well was the fact that students were given ample time to explore and produce a product. An entire term was allocated to the task, with various deadlines along the way to make sure that students were not tempted to leave things until the last minute. However, when the teacher found towards the end of term that students had really not had enough time to complete things to her satisfaction, she negotiated with leadership to organize an extension on the project. Coulthard has cited a lack of time as being a problem when doing inquiry-based learning in her book Guided Inquiry, Learning in the 21st Century, so it was very gratifying to observe the teacher appreciating the importance of sufficient time. Time is also important for the instructional team to get together and do their planning. This does not appear to be a problem in this school, as great importance is placed on the involvement of the teacher librarian and collaborative teaching in general. Sufficient time is always allocated for instructional team meetings. A potential problem for inquiry learning tasks identified by Coulthard's studies at Rutgers University was confusion of roles. Fortunately, this has not emerged as a problem at this school, as the members of the instructional team have a mutually accepted philosophical base of the importance and relevance of constructivist learning. They share a commitment to the development of students' information literacy and understand that good collegial collaboration is essential for successful inquiry learning support. The librarian had anticipated the need for printed matter on the subject before the task was administered, and had ordered relevant and up-to-date books beforehand. These were ready and waiting as the students started their project. The librarian also demonstrated effective Internet search strategies and the identification of valid and reliable Internet information. In addition to this, she modeled effective ways of keeping record of references in order to build up a bibliography. A further potential problem could have been a poorly designed assignment, but once again this was not the case here. The assignment had been specially designed for the course, and the entire term was used for the assignment. This meant that information literacy was acquired during the course of the assignment. These literacy skills were not taught in isolated lessons about various concepts on a once-off basis with no relevance to real-life situations. There was no teaching to the test, and indeed students were expected and encouraged to take responsibility for their own learning. Students conducted their own research and produced meaning from that experience. Primary data in the form of graphs, interviews, surveys and photographs were required as part of the task. The data then obtained needed to be analyzed and reported. Students received demonstrations on how to analyze graphs and write logical and meaningful sentences about their data, thus helping to build excellent information literacy skills. As this is a private school, there were not as many issues with blocked sites as tends to happen with EQ. Plus, there were ICT specialists on hand at the school to quickly remedy any problems as soon as they arose. This prevented the technical frustrations that often go hand in hand with the use of technology. Teenagers can become quite easily put off and distracted by technical glitches, and fortunately these were not an issue. Akara has not specifically mentioned the development of literacy skills. This places the responsibility of information literacy development into the hands of teacher librarians, who will need to examine the dimensions of the curriculum to find the elements of information literacy that are present and make links between these elements. Lupton, 2012. In step 4 of the task, emphasis of the iterative nature of inquiry learning emerged in the instruction. It is also expected that as you proceed with your research, you will develop and/or refine your research focus by developing new inquiry questions and research strategies. Although not explicitly stated in Coulthard's ISP, this circular or spiral pattern of inquiry learning is part of many inquiry learning models, as was certainly illustrated in this ILA. This is Brunner's inquiry model, which also demonstrates the circular nature of inquiry learning. Students are usually unprepared for the feelings of anxiety and frustration experienced during the early stages of an inquiry process. This is illustrated in some of the students' comments from the second questionnaire, when the students would have been experiencing the doubt, confusion and frustration of the exploration stage of Coulthard's ISP. Students wrote, "I'm very confused about what I'm supposed to be doing and what information I'm supposed to be looking for. And I find it difficult when the teacher is trying to teach us things, but I'm still not sure of the basics, so I can't learn more about something I don't know. And I didn't really receive much help from my teacher, therefore I didn't understand to the full extent what I'm researching." Coulthard points out that a large part of the instructional team's work is assisting students through those troubling times of uncertainty. When students are going through this phase and these emotions, they tend to think that they are the only ones experiencing uncertainty. They're usually relieved to discover that these feelings are common and to be expected. The instructional team can support students during these emotional upheavals by scaffolding, reassuring, and generally tailoring interventions in an enabling and enriching way. This gradually builds up their confidence and tenacity and helps students to develop the emotional maturity of knowing that the uncertain, frustrated feelings are normal, will happen, and can be overcome again. Part of the inquiry process is to flounder and struggle a little, but most teachers of young adolescents will attest to the fact that teenagers are notoriously impatient. Therefore, I would suggest a blog site or Facebook page that can be used as a student collaborative problem-solving resource or brains trust to support each other when the storms arise. Teachers would need access to the page as well, and it would exist with the understanding that it's not for gossip or general whinging, but as a place to go when timely assistance can be obtained, mainly from peers. It would also be a place where students would be gently and constantly reminded that they are responsible for their own learning, because it is not something that the teacher can give you. It often helps to hear an instruction rephrased in terminology that you're used to hearing, and this is something that could be accomplished on a shared site. One of the comments written on the questionnaire reflects this fact. Although I was confused at the beginning, with help from a few of my peers, I was able to finally get on track and complete my assignment to what I think was of satisfactory standards. This type of problem-solving cyberspace place would also be useful for instructors to become aware of any problems that would need intervention from the instructional team, rather than just a nudge in the right direction from a peer. During the ILA, I gave the students 3 questionnaires, one to be completed at the beginning, another at the middle, and another at the end of their ILA. And question 1 on every questionnaire asked, take some time to think about your topic. Now write down what you know about it. And responses were qualitatively graded into facts, explanations, or conclusions, depending on the type of information given and how it was worded. Here we have a graphic illustration of the results of that. And a reason for the greater number of facts rather than explanations and conclusions being reported in questionnaires 1 and 2 could be that students were not encouraged to write their replies in full sentences, as recommended in the SLIM toolkit, and they did not receive sufficient time to complete the questionnaire. During questionnaire 3, statements best suited for questionnaire 1 were written in response to questionnaire 6. So I've corrected my results taking those statements into account and produced the following graph. Here we see a steady yet significant increase in the number of facts in blue reported during the course of the inquiry task. The number of explanations in red decreases fairly dramatically in questionnaire 2 and then increases again in the last questionnaire, almost reaching the initial questionnaires level. Bloom's revised taxonomy describes conclusions as a higher order thinking task comparable to evaluating. As an inquiry task progresses, you would expect more of these higher order statements, as we see in questionnaire number 3. The number of conclusions drops to 0 in questionnaire 2 and then doubles for the last questionnaire, questionnaire 3. A reason for the decrease and then increase in explanations and conclusions would most likely be that midway through the task, when questionnaire 2 was answered, the students were in the exploration phase of Kulthau's ISP. This is described as the most difficult stage of the ISP, with students becoming frustrated and discouraged. It is at this stage that students most require assistance from their instructional team of teachers and librarians. The noticeable increase in explanations and conclusions in questionnaire 3 demonstrates that these students were able to benefit significantly from the intervention strategies that were provided by the instructional team and mentioned earlier in my talk. During conversations with students, it was also possible for me to assist with misunderstandings of words, for instance, the meanings and implications of primary and secondary data. Many of these interventions consisted of a one-on-one scaffolding, as suggested by Vygotsky in his zone of proximal development. The student's self-reported or perceived knowledge that comes from question 3 in each questionnaire uses a qualitative scoring rubric of 0 equals nothing, 1 equals not much, 2 equals quite a bit, and 3 equals a great deal. The question asks, how much do you know about this topic? When results are compared across the 3 questionnaires, we see that in the first questionnaire only 2 students answered nothing, and the majority of students answered not much. No student felt confident enough at this stage to answer a great deal. This is to be expected when students have recently been introduced to a new task. When the same question was asked a few weeks later, no students answered that they didn't know anything, but at this stage of the task, no student was confident enough in their knowledge to answer a great deal either. By the end of the task, when students had given their presentations, significantly more of them were confident enough in their knowledge to answer a great deal, and only 2 answered not much, with no student answering nothing. It's really exciting to observe how much students learn during inquiry-based tasks. Not only knowledge about their topic, but metacognitive knowledge about their own learning to learn as well. Second and third questionnaire, a question appeared asking students about their feelings regarding their research. Halfway through the inquiry task, only 3 students from the sample of 10 felt confident about their research and knew where they were heading. The rest of the students reported either feeling overwhelmed or confused. These sentiments were reflected by the cohort as a whole. This response is to be expected at this stage of an inquiry task. Once students have started researching, they often find the enormous amount of information available confusing and struggle to determine what is relevant, appropriate, or true. It is at this stage that intervention from the instructional team is often required. Once students have started to master the topic and have presented their findings, there's often an improvement in their feelings about the topic. This can be seen in the following graph comparing student feeling at the midway point to the end point of the inquiry task. The midway point would be questionnaire 2 on the left, and the end point would be questionnaire 3 on the right. Although in the last questionnaire, students were asked about skills they've learnt during the ILA, and this graph represents the response. Improvement strategies such as being more time efficient and organization, being more organized, rated very highly in this one. Although the task did possess aspects of information literacy that moved it into the transformative window of the GEST model by Lupton, 2002, namely identify a strategy that could be implemented either by you or your family or more widely in the community to reduce your footprint factor, I think this could have been emphasized more. Perhaps students could have shared it more widely in the community and indeed the world by creating a class blog. Perhaps inviting other classes that are doing similar projects in Australia and around the world could be invited to join in or comment. Maybe even a letter or a journal to a journal or a newspaper or a member of parliament. This would have moved the inquiry task further into the situational and transformative windows of the GEST model. In conclusion, I've thoroughly enjoyed my exploratory journey into inquiry learning. Now that I've experienced it, I cannot think of a better way to inspire students to learn. I hope to create an inquiry task of my own for students under my care one day, and will certainly make good use of the learning experiences that I have gained watching others learn via guided inquiry instruction. Thank you for watching.